Once again, this is Nuance. Thank you all for joining us. As always, I'm Mike Scala, joined by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip-hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
As we were talking about in the pregame, just finishing up this Nas Master Class. So
yes, and we actually had a discussion on that, if you recall, right here on Nuance a while back. It might have been when I was in Maryland on the way down to Florida. That might have been the episode.
I think we mentioned it that I was going to dig into it, and you've already seen this one, and I was
gonna say at that point I had seen it and you didn't see it yet, and so you weren't able to give your thoughts on it. So now that you have seen it, what do you think about it?
It's not what I expected. I thought it would be master class. I thought it'd be some sort of a class. There'd be some sort of actionable information, where it's more just an interview with whoever the subject is. Or at least, let me be fair, I've only seen this one, so the others could be very different, and I look forward to seeing some from some other people like Timbaland. Look forward to some investing ones, and maybe there might be different takeaways. But for this one, I'm kind of disappointed, actually.
Right. And I think that was part of my feedback as well when I saw it, that it wasn't really structured as a class. So you kind of feel like it's not exactly as advertised. It almost seems like the master class gimmick is just that, a gimmick to sell this as a class. But it's a collection of interesting people talking about what they do. And I think that's insightful to watch. Right. But if you're expecting it to be like school, it's really not most of the time.
Right. And before I got started, what I was impressed with is, when you go to a masterclass, you've got a packet that you can download that's got an informative packet. And that's pretty robust as far as, information on it, a little bit of backstory or whatever.
Did you download the Nas one? I didn't see one for him or look at it.
Yeah. No, I downloaded the Nas one.
Okay.
And it's well done. And let me see, how many pages was it? I forgot, but I was impressed with that. And so I had high hopes for the class, because I was like, wow, if they're putting this much effort into just this, then that might be some good info in there.
Right. And to be fair, I think there was some good info. I mean, he kind of starts off by saying there's really nothing that you don't know already, right? So, you have to, I guess, temper your expectations a little bit, but it was good to kind of be taken into his mind and his process. And even if it's just for your own validation, because you're like, okay, what he's doing really isn't any different from what I do. And I think I even said last time that there's a positive and there's a negative in that as well, because the negative to that is, well, damn, so there's no magic formula here. He's just doing the same thing I do, but he's a master, right? Even though, I think we think of ourselves as pretty good also, but it's like damn, to see someone who could do it that effortlessly, you're like, wow, I wish there was a secret he could teach me, but no, he just, it's just like anything else in life. It's just a lot of reps, a lot of practice.
Yeah. And that, you know what I mean? That was another thing that I was thinking, like, maybe to me, it's not like, this revolutionary, because like you said, it's something that we do also. So it's like, okay, yeah, I understand that feeling. I get that. Like, where's the jewels? I want something new. I want something fresh. But,
But so, I think maybe a positive takeaway from that is there can be some validation in knowing that what you're doing is not wrong, right? Like, if you see Nas do it the same way you've been doing it, all right, you're onto something. Now just keep practicing, keep trying to get better.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, even in the way that he was putting together, they had just that one video where it was not a very long video, where he was recording a verse with Hit Boy, and the way that he was going through it was not, I mean, he didn't seem prepared, but the part where he was just like mumbling with the beat and trying to just vibe and find words to go with it, like, that was very relatable, because, as you know, when the beat comes on, like, even when you're writing a verse, like, you may just start saying nonsense in your head to get the pattern, to get the flow, to get the vibe, and something might pop up, and that can lead to something that you write off of and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And just seeing him even record some of those mumbles or ideas, like they're like half-baked bars, right?
Right.
That's kind of an interesting approach. And I know some people do that, but that's not something I've ever really done. I've certainly played the beat a million times and said different things to myself while trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But I never really got on the mic and started recording. Maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot of that. Like usually by the time I start recording, I have a pretty good idea of where I want to go with it. But it seemed like he would just like immediately record whatever he had in his mind, even if it wasn't a finished thought, and then he would go back and try to make it better.
Like, I've done something similar, but more like not really where I go back and do that, but like where if I have a certain type of flow that I want on this beat and I haven't finished the verse yet, I might go in and record like a couple of bars so I can remember the flow the next time I go to say it, because it might be different. It might, and the next time I hear the beat, I might hear a different way of saying it, but I want to do it this way. And so I might throw it down and later listen to it so I can know how to write.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
No, but it was really interesting to see that come together. And I think really what sells it is that it's Nas, right? Like if it was someone who wasn't as acclaimed or as prominent in hip hop culture, it would be like, all right, this is nothing new or interesting or fascinating. It's just a guy recording. So what, we could do the same thing. But to see Nas, who is considered one of the masters of emceeing, do it, even if it's that validation, even if you're doing something you can relate to, or just like, oh, wow, okay, so he does it that way. Just watching him in his process a little bit, I think is worth the price of admission in its own right, even if you're not getting that classroom experience you might have been expecting.
Yeah, maybe it's just it's a little bit of a misnomer, I guess. Master class, I'm thinking, but
you could tell it was done in an interviews format, and I mentioned this last time also, because he would say something that on its face is presented like it's just him giving a lesson, but you could tell based on how it comes out that he's responding to a prompt that they're giving him, because he'll say something and then he'll go like this, like he'll give it like a nod at the end of it to let them know like he's done with his answer.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm almost finished with it. One or two more to go. And it's just like I said, it's just more his thoughts on some things, and kind of seemed like he wasn't very prepared. Like something that seems like he's kind of making it up as he goes along.
I think so. It didn't seem like he went in there with the whole lesson in mind. It was like,
right. But I think I've gotten that same sense from Nas before in other interviews when they ask him about certain meanings behind lyrics or certain things. And it just like, it sounds like he's making it up as he goes along to,
Oh, no, the funny part was, man, I think it was the interview with the Harvard professor, and she was trying to find all these deep meanings in Illmatic that he hadn't even thought of. And
right, that's the one.
Yeah, and I forgot exactly what she was at, but she was like going like really deep into it. She's like, oh, well, this could have like 4 or 5 different meanings. Could it also be this? Could it also be this? Does it mean this? And he was just like, it does now. I didn't think of that, but sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm remembering, because we had a discussion on that. Like when that came out, it's like he was just writing. He wasn't thinking that deeply, apparently. Like, yeah.
But that's art, though. A lot of painters even will tell you, like, you can find all kinds of meaning in a painting. Maybe the painter didn't have it in mind. Maybe it was subconscious. Maybe it was just whatever they were feeling. But the viewer, right, the person receiving the art can receive it in any way. And that's what makes art so special, right? It can be interpreted a bunch of different ways. And it could have different meaning to you, based on who you are, what your thoughts and feelings are.
Right. And how it resonates with someone else, or how it resonates with someone else. So, I just thought, I got that sense again this time, just more like, someone just told him like, yeah, dude, it's really easy. You just come in, we ask you a bunch of questions, we record it. That's it.
Yeah. Here's your check. You're good.
Yeah.
But one thing I did find interesting in that also was how he admitted that he made mistakes on Illmatic. Did you get to that part yet?
Yeah. That I thought was
so that's just Stallone and Sly Stone he mixed up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he meant to say Sly Stallone, but he said, Sly Stone. But I think that was an interesting bit. Because we've seen that, right, in some other songs that came out, not just from Nas, even some Jay-Z songs. There's some bits where you're thinking that was a mistake.
Right.
Not the verse, but even just like some random sounds that were left in and whatnot.
Yeah.
That was a mistake, but it's like, all right, we'll just leave it in.
Right. But Nas also makes the point that sometimes that mistake adds an element of rawness to the song that actually enhances it. And I've said this before, watching a live performance. I think we were talking about the Chris Rock special where he messed up at the end of his set, right? And I was like, wow, but that one mess up actually makes the set more impressive in a way, because that's signaling to you that they're not cleaning up every mistake. And so if you went a whole hour without messing up and just messed up that one time, that means everything that came before it was first take, basically. I mean, unless they just kept that one in on purpose to throw you off, but that's how you kind of receive it, right? Like, okay, wow. So that means that he messed up once, but he didn't mess up for the rest of the time.
Yeah. And in live performances, mistakes happen all the time. Like it's inevitable. Like everybody, no matter what your level is, you're gonna make a mistake at some point. Like I've made mistakes on stage. I've seen Snoop on stage made mistakes on stage.
Oh, yeah. The only real mistake you can make on stage, though, is to act like it's a mistake and like acknowledge it, right? Like, because you're expected, it's a live show, like you said. So you're expected to have slip ups. And most of the time the audience isn't going to know unless they know like word for word, everything that you're saying. And like they're really that much in tune. But most of the time you just play it off. Like it's, you just keep going, and that's the show. It's just, and that it makes the show better because it shows how you can react on your feet even.
Yeah. I remember the Snoop one. It was a concert that I went to. It was a long time ago. And he was doing a song, and I don't remember what it was, but I think he messed up in the song. And so he stopped the song and he was like, yeah, let's just run that back. I just started over and did it again.
Or like a classic one is like, you mess up and then you're frustrated and now you fall off beat and now you're upset with yourself. So now you can't even think of the next bar. And like, now it's getting worse and worse. You got to play it off like, you know what, DJ, acapella, let's go. Let's do the first acapella. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's kind of an appeal of live performances, that there's going to be this element that that you won't get in a recording that's going to be exact same every time.
It's funny you say that, because I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather told me once we should stay up and watch Saturday Night Live, and I'm like, why? What's so special about staying up for that? And he was like, well, it's live. Hopefully they'll mess up and we can catch them making mistakes. Like that was the appeal of watching it for him. Yeah.
So, there is an appeal of seeing something that's not super polished all the time,
like Nuance.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
People don't realize, like, we just get on here a few minutes before we start and say, what do you want to talk about today? Some people think we prepare a masterclass like the whole week. Like they'll hit me up on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So what's on the agenda for next Tuesday? I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure it out 5 minutes before we go live on Tuesday.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But one more point I wanted to make real quick on mistakes being left in songs. A big one was the 50 Cent verse on the Eminem album where she said she's an inspiring actress instead of an aspiring actress. And I think we were like, no one in the studio told him that that's wrong. He should change that.
Right. Yeah.
Like, someone at some point would have said, hey, Fifth, like you might want to change that. This is gonna be embarrassing. This is an Eminem album. You sure you want to say this on here?
Yeah. And there's one, and I can't think of the name of the Jay-Z song where at the end of it, it sounds like someone was supposed to say something, then it gets cut. Or
no, I know what you're talking about. It's on the Rough Riders album, the Jigga, that one.
That one, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, it leaves like an outtake of that female singer saying the chorus. And it was like she starts saying it and stops herself because she realized that she wasn't supposed to say it again or whatever. And they just put that part in there.
Yeah. And it's clearly a mistake, but it's
But I kind of think that might have been left in intentionally, almost like a prank or a joke or something like funny, something like more flavor to add to the song. I don't know if they overlooked that.
Yeah, I did. What was it? It's a little bit off topic, but I did just see recently an interview with, I think it was, forget who it was, but he was talking about on that Tupac song that originally Inspector Deck was on the verse, but Tupac cut him out of the verse. And so at the end of that song, you hear this open space and you can hear just a few backups. So when I think it was Daz mixed it, Daz left the backups in for Inspector Deck's verse. And so all you hear is an accent over a word or two, second half of a word or two that goes throughout the end of the ride out. And it's like, And so like the verse has now made its way on the internet. It was actually a pretty dope verse, but I guess Tupac either thought it was competition or whatever and had it cut. And so Daz just kind of let the backups in there as seemed like a mistake.
Was that, yeah, I was going to say, was that done deliberately or?
I think Daz did it deliberately. I think the guy said that it was Daz that did it, but yeah.
Why would he do that deliberately? Like, thought it was enhancing the song somehow, or just like thought it was funny?
I don't know, but
I like how DJ Premier will throw out your backup track. And this was something that I long suspected he did, because I would notice that when an artist would do a song produced by Premier and Premier was mixing it, there would be no backups. And that's like a very nerdy, like, you know, hip hop thing. Like, you really have to be paying attention to that kind of thing. But I would always notice that, like, how come on the one Premier song on the album, there are no backups? It's because Premier, and I heard him say this, he doesn't use them. Like, you'll send him your verse and your backups and your ad-libs. He'll just take the main vocal and disregard the other stuff.
Wow, never heard that. Wow, interesting. Yeah. I'll have to listen to hear if there's, you know, anything like that. Interesting. Yeah.
So, yeah. Queens DA's race.
Yes, Queens DA's race.
Since polls close at 9 p.m., I hope everyone out there voted who's eligible. And some confusion on this. If you are a registered Republican or working families or conservative or not enrolled in a party, you're an unaffiliated voter, you actually do not have a primary locally here, at least in Queens, because there's no competitive election. And of course, you have to be enrolled in a party to vote in that party's primary. But if you're in those parties, which are not Democratic parties, there don't happen to be two candidates or more running in any race today. And so there just won't be a primary for you. If you're a Democrat here in this area, they've got the Queens DA's race, district attorney, as well as a civil court judge race. And so these are the races on the ballot today. We should hopefully have results shortly after polls close, although today is sometimes hard to get results right away, especially in close races. I don't know how close these will be, but we'll keep an eye on that tonight. So, of course, the big one there is Queens District Attorney. You've got the incumbent Linda Katz. And what's interesting about that one is you've got a candidate running to the left on a very progressive platform, and then a candidate running to the right on a more conservative platform. She's more moderate. In fact, her mailer that she sent out highlights both respecting people's rights and being tough on crime, right? So she's trying to show that she can walk and chew gum at the same time, I guess, as we've talked about here before. So that's her lane, right? You've got people thinking that the focus should be on locking more people up, and then people who think the focus should be more on respecting people's rights. She's trying to walk that middle line there. She would be described, certainly in this particular race, as the moderate candidate given the field. And so it'll be fascinating to see how Queens votes, because in some way, this is a measure of the ideological makeup of Democratic voters in Queens. Now, I say that with the caveat that Melinda Katz, is the incumbent and certainly has the most political organization and endorsements and infrastructure behind her. And so you have to take that into consideration as well, that she's coming into this with the most power and she's expected to win. So it may not be an exact measurement of everyone's ideology if she's able to deliver her message with more resources than the other candidates. Keep that in mind. But nonetheless, it is interesting data to look at and see kind of where people's affiliations lie.
Yeah, you know, this I find the same thing that makes me a little uncomfortable here as when we talk about judges' elections. The fact that you have a district attorney who is either conservative or liberal or progressive, like, to have these labels attached to people that are supposed to be unbiased in terms of enforcing the law, that kind of makes me uncomfortable. Just doesn't sit right. It doesn't seem like that's what it should be. It sounds counterintuitive to what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. I agree. It's an attorney and it's a prosecutor ultimately, right? You run into be the prosecutor for Queens. And so it's really part of the judicial system, if you wish, right? Now, not exactly a judge, not exactly the courts. It's a lawyer before the courts. So it is more political in its in that capacity. But nonetheless, like you're saying, it's not a position that should be overtly political, right? It's a prosecutor. So you would think their function would be to prosecute people who commit crimes without regard for political leanings or ideology. With that said, it is an election, and everything right now is hyper partisan and political. And when you're running for a position like that, people are going to want to know what your philosophy is as a prosecutor. So,
Yeah.
right. So if you say, I think that, people aren't being locked up enough, people who are criminals are out on the street, and we need to be harsher on people, even who commit petty offenses, right? You have the broken windows theory, things like that. There are people who think that you should just try to get as many people as you can locked up who are doing things that we don't like, or that are criminal to some degree, even if not very serious, because it leads to more serious crimes. Right? People think that you kind of cast a wide net and you're going to get more bad apples off the street. So there's that philosophy. Then you have the philosophy on the other side, which is that we need to really focus on reforming the criminal justice system. And maybe even we're being too punitive as a society and people's rights aren't being respected. There's a philosophy out there that, I don't agree with it, but you'll hear people say that the reason crime is up is because we're over-policed. They'll say that people feel like crabs in a bucket, or, like they're in this police state. They're always being watched. They're always being scrutinized. And that makes them on edge and it gives them anxiety. And that's what drives crime up, right? I think it's a much more complicated scenario than that. I think that's very, very reductive thing to say that serves that particular political agenda. But it is a philosophy that's out there also. And then you have people like Katz who try to walk the line a little bit and say, listen, we want to be able to address crime and be tough where it's warranted, but we also want to make sure we're respecting people's rights and we're not overcharging. So she's trying to find a balance there. And I think these are all valid questions to ask candidates running for that role. But when you start getting into those conversations, I think those labels are going to be inevitable. People are going to classify them as progressive, moderate, or conservative based on their philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's just, I don't know. It just, like I said, it seems counterintuitive. And it's a little bit uncomfortable, I guess is the word I'm trying to
Definitely is. Yeah, and even more so when it comes to judicial candidates, right? Yeah. People running for judge, because you don't know a whole lot about their philosophy, because they're not supposed to really tell you much about that, right?
And
so they
really
talk about their background.
Yeah, their personal philosophy shouldn't necessarily come into play. As I don't know. Yeah.
So then, how do you decide which candidate to vote for? That's why a lot of people don't vote for these local positions, even though people should vote for everything they're allowed to. A lot of people just don't know what the candidates really stand for, and then it's like, well, which club is this candidate running with? Which district leader backed this judge for nomination? Or, which part is the party behind this one? Or is this the insurgent or the county candidate? And that's like, well, I think I'm more an outsider, so I'm gonna vote for the insurgent, or I like the party people, or whatever it is. People vote based on affiliations and
they're
with, because there's not a whole lot of information they can get about how they would be as judges.
Yeah, and then of course on the flip side of it, I understand that, for example, you wouldn't want to put the hanging judge on the bench versus someone who's going to be a little bit more thoughtful, someone who's going to be a lot more punitive and a lot more, vindictive in their rulings, versus someone that's going to have more compassion and understanding. Like, I get that. It's just associating these rules that are supposed to be non-political and nonpartisan with parties just sounds a little counterintuitive.
It does, though. And that intuition is spot on, especially when you consider the fact that judges in particular are supposed to be checks against the political process, in a sense, right? Even though they're part of it in terms of them being elected, they're supposed to be checks on the executive branch and the legislative branch. And so if the legislature passes a law that's unconstitutional and the governor or the mayor or the executive signs that law, then the judicial branch is supposed to step in and say, you overstepped your bounds, we're going to overturn that, right? And so they are supposed to be above the fray, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So.
But in the case of a prosecutor, and that's what the district attorney is, right? The chief prosecutor for the county, which in this case is Queens. And of course, then they call them ADAs, right? Assistant DAs, to take on all these cases. They're the lawyers who work in the office and they go out and actually do the work. They do set the agenda because they decide which cases ultimately get prosecuted and which ones don't. So it's not like everyone who gets arrested by the police is going to be charged by the DA, right? They have a lot of discretion in terms of which cases that they're really going after. And I think that makes it a little bit more political, because you're going to want to know before you vote, which kind of cases are you going to try to prosecute here? Are you going to try to lock up everyone who was caught, I don't know, urinating, even though that they decriminalized that behavior? But, are you going to go after petty offenses very aggressively? Or are you going to focus mostly on violent crimes? Or are you going to go after white collar people, even though, the attorney general starts getting into a lot of that stuff? But what is your approach going to be here? I mean, I think that's something you want to know of those candidates.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sorry. What was that about urination?
Yeah, public urination. That goes back to the quality of life, broken windows theory, right? There are a lot of people who believe that offenses that would be considered petty or relatively small time on their own are indicative of larger criminal behavior existing, right? So they're like, all right, if a lot of people are doing things like that, graffiti or urinating on the building, on the street or whatever, like, let's be harsh on them. Let's get them off the streets, because that will keep our streets cleaner and safer. That's that theory, right? And they did in New York City decriminalize a lot of those so-called quality of life offenses. Like, I think public urination, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a violation now and not a misdemeanor anymore. And so the DA wouldn't be able to charge you just for doing that. But there are a lot of people who want the DA to be as harsh as possible and prosecute as many people as possible. And then there are a lot who think that they're overly harsh already. And they think that the focus should be on ending incarceration or ending mass incarceration, right? There are people who believe that too. And then there are people who are more in the middle who say, I think people who commit serious crimes should be prosecuted, but maybe we should be careful we don't over prosecute. And maybe we should direct our resources, because we have a limited number of resources. Let's direct the resources we do have to going after the serious criminals. So, there are all different types of approaches here. And again, it's going to be interesting to see how Queens votes and how different neighborhoods in Queens vote, right? You might look at a more conservative area and see them vote in the Democratic primary even for that more conservative DA candidate, or maybe Katz wins everywhere if her resources just were able to overpower everyone else's, because she does have the most money. She does have the most endorsement. She is being supported by the Democratic Party, by, I think, all the unions, if not most of the unions that are getting involved in this. So the power is definitely on her side. She is the incumbent. Let's keep that in mind.
Right. Yeah. So now, briefly, I think it'd be important to say what the district attorney does. Like, what's their function?
Yeah, well, we said it. They're the prosecutor. So they hire a staff of ADAs, assistant district attorneys, and they're then assigned cases, right? When the police arrest someone for a crime. So if you have someone who commits what they call a violation, like something that you would get a ticket for, the prosecutor doesn't get involved in that. But when it's a crime, it is up to them to decide whether the case is strong enough, whether the evidence is there, whether the witnesses are cooperating and so forth, whether the person wants to press charges and pursue it. If there is a crime there, and if there's a case, then they are the prosecutor in the case. And so the person who is now standing trial or facing this charge will have to defend it. So they get their own lawyer. Maybe it's a public defender. Maybe they hire someone. Maybe they represent themselves. But it's their case now where they're defending themselves against the prosecutor. And so when you see, the state going after someone in a certain county, it's a DA, it's a prosecutor who's the lawyer representing the government against the accused.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. And so you said tonight is the primary. So how's the turnout looking? Is any info on that?
Yeah, very, very low. And you kind of expect it to be a low turnout year in general, because it is what they call an off year. Every 20 years, even the city council does redistricting, and they've got these 2-year terms. So, the mayor, for example, ran for election in 2021. The next mayor's race will be in 2025. 2023 is like this midterm year. So it's even lower than it normally is. When I was in Howard Beach voting earlier, the poll worker there said that in all of early voting, the 9-day period preceding this, I think there's only 54 people voted in the area. So that's an abysmally low number. That's like between 5 and 6 people a day voting.
Yeah, that's It's kind of embarrassing. But I think some of it, I think we could probably attribute some of it to, one, it's a lesser, so-called lesser race. A lot of people don't turn out unless it's like the big show. And two, like having that understanding of what you're voting for. Like people, I think in general, people hear about district attorney or the ADA. They hear it more on TV shows, movies, but actually knowing what they do in the community, what their function is and why you should vote for it, I think is not as widely understood as, your senator, your congressman, your president type of thing, mayor.
And even that, let's be honest, most voters vote straight party line on Congress and senator and that kind of thing also. They're really paying attention to the presidential race, maybe then governor and maybe mayor, right? But aside from that, it's like, most people, like, unless you're really into it and you're the type who comes out and votes every single year and you're really involved, most voters are not paying attention at that level to those local or those major offices, right? Because most media doesn't cover it. You'd have to look at local papers. You'd have to look at your local news channels in New York One or something like that. But you turn on CNN or MSNBC, you're not getting local stuff, right? These are national stations. You're getting the presidential race, maybe something on your governor's race.
Right. And you'd have to do a little bit more of your own research in that regard. Looking up the candidates yourself. You could set Google alerts and whatnot to trigger for anything that comes out for these people's names. But, it is a little bit extra in regards
to
it.
And that's also why these low turnout races tend to favor incumbents.
Yeah.
Because these are the people who are kind of part of the establishment in a sense, not saying that they're candidates or politicians themselves, but, they vote all the time. And they're much more likely to know the incumbents personally because they're very much involved in the neighborhood and the community. And, they see that person's name a lot because they are paying attention. And it's just that kind of thing. And also the incumbent has the resources to get people out, to get out the vote drive, right? They can knock on the doors and make the calls and say, hey, you need to ride to the polls. They've got the organization behind them to get people out because they're not coming out on their own to vote for mayor or high ticket election. They're actually being led to the polls for the most part by the candidates. And so it comes down to resources and organization.
Right. So
there you go. I hope you vote, whoever you vote for. If you can, you've got another hour and a half if you're watching this live. 9:00, polls close, and it is important. If you have a question who the candidates are, feel free to hit me up. I can explain it. But as I said, in the DA's race, it's very interesting because it does break down somewhat cleanly in terms of a progressive DA, a moderate DA, or a conservative DA. Which kind of DA do you want?
Right. Absolutely.
All right. And I think we got to wrap this thing up a little bit early tonight.
Yeah, we have to. It just so happens I am going to be doing guest lecturing at Temple University, Japan. Have a class starting in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be at a different time, but they sent me the time back, and it was the 8:40 a.m. class, which I think it's 7:40 over there in your time. So, I just got that in yesterday. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought this was afternoon. So, going to be lecturing there. Actually, I don't know, the past 2 years, every semester I've guest lectured there at the school. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So
I hope you're more prepared for your master class than Nas was.
I'm a little bit more prepared. I think I am. I'm ready. So we're going to be talking about, some BLM stuff. People are they've got some questions they want to ask about student resource officers in schools, prison system, and abolish the police, because a lot of the students are international students, not just American students. So they're looking at it from an outside point of view, not understanding or experiencing what is happening in the States, or the context of it. So they might have different ideologies, or they might not even know a lot about it. They've heard something about it and don't understand it. So
they hear the buzzwords, maybe.
Right. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Last time I had some pretty good questions from a couple of the students. So
why are Americans so crazy? Is that what they're asking?
Not quite, but I'm sure they're thinking it. So
reminds me of that Seinfeld episode where the Japanese TV executive is like, is this customary in your culture? Like, we don't understand this at all.
So, but yeah, we'll have to wrap it up. But again, YouTube, as always, check us out on YouTube and Instagram, Nuance Show. Next week we can get into the poll question. We did have about 1,300 views on the last poll question.
Okay.
And go there for the recaps, and of course, podcast wherever podcasts are at.
Yes, and the bottom line is vote, vote, vote. Even if you think it's not going to matter, it's a low turnout race, predetermined, it's the outcome is it. Whatever you think, it's important to register your vote and get that turnout up as much as possible, because people do look at where the votes are coming from, believe it or not. Even if you think that the winner is already going to be, known in advance, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Show that there's turnout here, and that the people who get into office have to respect your neighborhood because the people of your neighborhood vote.
Boom.
There you go.
All right.
We'll catch you next time. We've got work to do, guys.